Sleepers, breakouts, and busts in the outfield. Up next on Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Welcome into FBT Express on Tuesday, February 11th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White. We're going to take a look at the outfield position, Scott, and start things off with a sleeper. Who you got?
My sleeper is Brandon Nimmo, mainly because I just love the value. I think in terms of impact, he should be right up there with Brian Reynolds, Seiya Suzuki, Riley Green, for the impact he's going to make. Like, he's not going to be somebody who is a stud performer for your team, but he's going to be very stable, must-start type of player, and yet he's going 50 to 60 picks after those guys. And I think the reason Brandon Nimmo is going 50 to 60 picks after those guys is because he hit 224 last year. That's basically it. He proved his power credentials twice over now, 23 homer season. He stole 15 bases. He never had double digits before, but went a perfect 15 for 15 on steals. He's always had the speed to do that. I think it was just an instance, like we've seen with lots of players around the league, of him learning to take advantage of those new rules. And so I think that's going to stick. 90 RBI, 88 runs. He gets on base a lot. He's in a prime RBI spot because he's going to be batting behind like Juan Soto and Pete Alonso. So 5-category production here, potentially, if not for that batting average, that 224 batting average. But I think we can call that a fluke for Brandon Nimmo, because the previous 4 seasons, 274, 274, 292, 280. He's normally like a 275, 280 hitter, and he just had this 224 hitting season. Now, I will say, because someone will scream at me if I don't, he was contending with plantar fasciitis last year. Didn't really cost him time, but it may have impacted the low batting average. And it sounds like he may not be totally past it yet. I know the Mets are planning to hold him out for the start of spring training. Should be ready for opening day. I don't think it's going to be an issue where it costs some time, but could it have contributed to the lower than usual batting average, and could that continue into this year? I guess it's possible, but correlation does not equal causation, right? And I think more likely, when you consider all the other numbers looked for Nimmo, that 224 batting average just seems like a total aberration, and I think it'll be corrected. I think it'll be a 5-category contributor. I think it'll be a great value.
The average draft position for Brandon Nimmo, 141, as the 38th outfielder off the board. Sleeper for me is going to be Josh Lowe from the Tampa Bay Rays. Had that awesome 2023 a couple years ago, 292 batting average, 20 homers, 32 steals, 835 OPS. Last season, completely ravaged by an oblique injury. First suffered it in spring training, but he went on the IL twice with that injury. He was limited to just 106 games. I just don't think Josh Lowe was ever right last season. Even with that, he managed 10 home runs, 25 steals, actually hit the ball harder than ever before. And this upcoming season, the Tampa Bay Rays are playing their home games in George Steinbrenner Field, the same dimensions as Yankee Stadium. That is the third best home run park factor for left-handed batters, the short portion right field. So I think that'll play up well for someone like Josh Lowe. And I think we get closer to the player he was a couple of years ago. 15 to 20 home runs, 30 plus steals, solid batting average. The ADP is 169. This time last year, Josh Lowe was a top 75 pick. So I do think we're going a little bit too far the other way, and he's someone I would be targeting as a sleeper this season. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.
Yeah, we always find our way back home.
Welcome back in FBT Express. Scott, give me a breakout in the outfield.
So I like Lawrence Butler as a breakout this year. He always showed good exit velocity readings in the minors, but struck out too much. It wasn't clear that he'd ever overcome that, and that's why he wasn't a high-end prospect. And look, he got off to a terrible start this past year. Was batting 179, striking out 31% of the time. But then he got sent to the minors, came back, started July, worked with the athletics director of hitting, eliminating excess movement from his swing, staying back on the ball. It was a very short period of time he worked with him, but the change was immediate and it was stark. From July 1st on, Lawrence Butler hit 302 with 20 homers, 14 steals, and a 943 OPS. That's basically half a season. You just double it to find out the pace he was on, a 40 homer, 28 steal pace. And the strikeout rate during that time was 21%, again, versus 31% previously. 21% is great. If those gains hold for Lawrence Butler, then could be a absolute stud in fantasy, and somebody you use a 6th round pick on, and he ends up outperforming your first rounder. Of course, there's downside risk. Maybe after the long off season, he slips back into bad habits, and the Athletics can't get him out of it. That's possible, but I think in that 75 range, pick 75 overall, I'm seeing nothing but upside for Butler.
I do wish he was going a little bit later, but I agree on the upside. I wrote Butler up as a breakout as well. I love the fact that he hit lefties well as a young left-handed batter, because that tells me that he should be an everyday player once again. Obviously, a safe playing time projection there. And yeah, I do like the upside as well for someone like Butler. I also like the upside for Jason Dominguez, whose ADP is right around 150. He's the 40th outfielder off the board. He's still just 22 years old. I feel like we have prospect fatigue with Jason Dominguez. We've heard his name for years. He was signed as a 16-year-old back in the day with the Yankees, and they dubbed him the Martian for all these crazy out-of-this-world tools that he has. And it's been an up and down path. Some rocky times in the minors, had the Tommy John surgery last year. But I think now the Yankees are finally starting to get it. They're just going to hand the left field job over to Jason Dominguez. He doesn't have to, there's no position battle here. He's just, boom, he's going to play left field. He's going to be an everyday outfielder for the Yankees. And I think there's a non-zero chance he could lead off for this team at some point as well. The roster construction of the Yankees, they don't have a clear leadoff type hitter. Jazz Chisholm, not a big OBP guy. Anthony Volpe, I don't think that they want to really use him in that spot either. You look at Jason Dominguez's minor league profile, great eye at the plate, big OBPs. He has good speed. He's got a little bit of pop. He's got a pull happy approach in Yankee Stadium. So I still think there's big upside here for Dominguez, someone we've heard for years about, 20 homers, 30 plus steals. I think it's not that I'm expecting that, but it is a possibility this upcoming season for Jason Dominguez. Scott, why don't you bring us home with a bust in the outfield?
I'm going to say Brenton Doyle is a bust because I think people are overlooking the downside risk with him. 260 batting average, 23 homers, 30 steals last year. If he does that again, fine. He's worth a top 80, top 70 pick. But I will point out that for basically his entire professional career prior to last year, so I'm talking minors as well, Brenton Doyle struck out about 35% of the time, which is untenable. You got to hit the ball like Aaron Judge to overcome that. Last year, he got that down to 25%. Big improvement. Still not a great strikeout rate, but a big improvement. And I think that was largely why he contributed. He was able to have the breakout season he did. If he gives some of that back, though, and again, a long track record of just a crazy high strikeout rate, then I think it's a fine line between him being a must-start player and kind of a fringy rosterable player in fantasy. I'll also note that he hit 211 with 636 on the road last year, the good year. 211, 636 OPS on the road. That's kind of typical for Rockies hitters, but usually it's not quite that extreme. Usually they're not quite that useless on the road. And it requires Brenton Doyle to be a world beater at home. I think any slippage in his home production or in the strikeout rate there could be enough to make him a huge disappointment this year.
All right, and a bust for me is going to be Pete Crow Armstrong, but we're out of time. So if you want to hear why, listen to our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today Express, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.